All right, let's talk about one of the biggest questions ever asked. Does God exist? We've all heard the debates, right? Science versus philosophy, faith versus reason. But what if the Bible itself never really tries to answer it that way? Today, we're going to look at this whole thing from the inside out, exploring the actual framework the biblical authors used to make sense of the world around them.
Here it is, the big one. You know, it doesn't matter if you're a person of faith, a total skeptic, or somewhere in the middle. This is a question that finds all of us at some point. It's personal, it's huge, and for a lot of us, the conversation starts with one simple demand.
In our modern world, we want proof. We're looking for that rock-solid logical argument, that scientific experiment that just settles it, Something that can deliver absolute certainty. And that's a totally natural desire. But what if that very demand for a specific kind of proof is actually the thing getting in the way? And that, right there, is the big idea for our explainer today. The Bible itself, it never really attempts to prove God with some abstract philosophical formula. It has a completely different starting point, and that is what we are going to dive into right now. So what is this different approach? Well, it's not about inventing some new argument for God. It's about trying to understand the ancient mindset that actually produced the biblical texts in the first place. This framework is often called the Divine Council Worldview, and trust me, it completely reframes the question. The crucial point is this. This worldview doesn't start with a philosophical defense. It starts exactly like the Bible does. In the beginning, God. And then it argues that this starting point provides the most coherent, the most sensible explanation for reality, for our shared human experience, and for the entire sweep of history. This slide just lays out the two paths perfectly. On the left, you've got the path that's looking for mathematical certainty, but the path on the right, the biblical worldview path, it asks a totally different question. It's not asking for a proof, it's asking for the best explanation. Which story makes the most sense of all the different pieces of our existence? So let's look at some of those puzzle pieces, the stuff of human experience. The argument is that when you view them through this biblical lens, they don't just kind of fit together. They actually form a clear and really compelling picture. Okay, here's our first piece. Think about this. Across every culture, every continent, and every single period of history, human beings have believed in some kind of unseen spiritual realm. That's a pretty striking universal constant, isn't it? So why? From this perspective, this universal belief in the supernatural isn't just some weird cultural quirk. No, it's presented as evidence that we are literally wired to perceive a reality beyond the just what you can see material world. That instinct to worship isn't an accident, but a reflection of humanity's true place in a much bigger spiritual reality. Now, for one of the toughest puzzle pieces of all, and maybe the most common objection you hear against the existence of a good God, the problem of evil and suffering. I mean, how can a good God in a world this broken exist at the same time? This biblical worldview completely flips the script on this problem. It argues that evil isn't a surprise at all. It's an expected, tragic part of the story. The Bible describes this cosmic rebellion, a real conflict between God and hostile spiritual powers. So from this viewpoint, all the suffering we see isn't proof that God is absent. Instead, it's seen as a heartbreaking confirmation of the spiritual war the Bible has been talking about all along. All right, here's the next piece of the puzzle: morality. Right alongside that universal belief in the supernatural, there seems to be this universal sense of right and wrong. We all feel the weight of moral obligation, that I should or I shouldn't. Where on earth does that come from? So this worldview proposes that our moral sense is no accident. It's like an echo, an imprint of the Creator's own character on our very nature. In this view, we feel that justice is real because it's rooted in a real moral God. It's a clue that's been embedded deep inside of us, pointing to something way beyond the material world. So we've looked at these pieces of human experience, our spiritual intuition, the problem of evil, our shared morality, and this worldview argues they all form a pretty coherent picture. But the argument doesn't just stop with philosophy. It grounds its entire claim in a single, pivotal, make-or-break event in history. And this is it. This is the anchor. The argument moves from, does this make sense, to a bold historical claim. The entire framework, the whole thing, hinges on this one point. If the resurrection is a historical fact, well then the debate is over. The God of the Bible is real. Now, this isn't presented as a matter of just taking a blind leap of faith, but as a conclusion you can reach based on historical reasoning. The case points to three core facts. First, you have the empty tomb, a verifiable public claim in first-century Jerusalem. Second, the radical, unbelievable change in Jesus' followers, who went from hiding in a locked room to proclaiming his resurrection at the cost of their own lives. And third, the existence of these super early confessions of faith, which scholars date to within just a few years of the event itself.
And this is where that historical claim snaps right back into the bigger picture. Within this worldview, the resurrection isn't just some isolated miracle. Oh no, it's the climax of that cosmic conflict we were talking about. It's the moment God is said to have publicly defeated the powers of death and evil, vindicating his authority over all of creation.
So let's bring all this together. This biblical worldview, it offers a very different kind of answer to our original question, mainly because it shifts the entire goal of the conversation. The claim isn't that you can prove God's existence in a lab or work it out on a blackboard. The argument is that the existence of the biblical God provides the most powerful and coherent explanation for the world as we actually experience it. Our spiritual longings, our moral intuitions, the reality of evil, and a pivotal event in history. It's a case built on coherence, not coercion.
And so, this worldview turns the original question completely on its head. The question isn't, can God be proven? The question it leaves us with is this. Considering all the pieces of the puzzle, can our world, in all its beauty, its brokenness, and its mystery, be truly and fully understood without him? That's the question this ancient perspective asks us to consider. Thanks for watching.